Hello, everyone, and welcome to our fifth and final Open Insight session, 1 year with the Iris Monitor, Future Pathways, and Community Insights. Today, we have with us Ioanna Grypari, Monitor and Indicators Lead, who will kick off the session with pilot reflections, successes, challenges, and what Iris organizations told us during the pilot. We also have with us Jessica Catalano from the Center for Industrial Studies in Milan, who will share insights from the PathOS project on what evidence from open science impact pathways and cost-benefit case studies can tell us about how to design monitoring that is meaningful and value-focused. And last but not least, we have Iain Hrynaszkiewicz from the Public Library of Science, who will provide insights from the Open Science Monitoring Initiative and present how shared principles and community-led approaches can help build credible and useful open science monitoring frameworks. A few housekeeping notes. Please keep your microphones muted during the presentations to avoid any background noise. During the Q&A, you're welcome to unmute and turn on your camera to participate. And feel free to submit your questions in the chat at any time, and we'll address them during the Q&A. Please also note that this session is being recorded and transcribed, and if you wish to participate but not to be included in the recording, let us know here in the chat and we'll assure your contribution is edited out. And with that, I'll give the floor to Ioanna.
Thank you, Marilu. Thanks everyone for being here, and a big thanks to Iain and Jessica for joining us. I'm going to start by sharing my screen. All right, so hopefully you can see my screen now.
No, Ioanna, we can't see your screen.
Okay, let's try again. Now you can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
All right. So I know some people emailed us that they were not able to join because of a day off in some countries, but we'll make sure to post the recording with the slides. And of course, everyone listening to this expost, if you have any questions and so on, please feel free to contact us. So this is the fifth webinar in this series for the National Open Access Monitor for Ireland. We were doing training and some stakeholder webinars last year. And now we did, since January, we did this smaller series of 5 webinars. Since we have guests here that are not from Ireland, are not so familiar with the monitor, I'm going to set the scene a little bit. So let me progress with the slides. So first of all, let me say that, as we said last time, we reached an agreement to extend the monitor. So for now, it's going to keep going, which is great. And then we have 2 presentations coming up at WUC 2025 in Bologna and at the CONUL conference in Ireland. So if anyone is there, keep an eye out. Okay, so let's see. So the monitor launched around this time last year after a tender process from Ireland. And the goal was to help organizations, researchers, and Ireland altogether reach 100% open access and build a community tool that could be integrated to organizational workflows. It was accompanied by a report that has data quality analysis from the time that the monitor was launched to kind of set the scenes and lessons learned and recommendations for improving that quality. So the mission was, how are we going to reach 100%? So first we start by providing transparent, comprehensive insights in the state of the art. So based on the 4 major pillars of the monitor of transparency and fair principle, comprehensive and smart insights, timeliness and precision, and inclusivity and usability, we set forth to do the monitor. So we set it up as 5 different dashboards. One is you can find it here in the address in the top right. One is the national dashboard that includes indicators and so on and research products at the national level. And then each research funding organization, each researcher with an ORCID ID, each research performing organization, and each registered institutional repository, they have a dashboard as well. So basically, Ireland came here and said, okay, let's make everything public. Every single organization, every single researcher at the national level, let's just expose whatever the data is, try to track and try to make it better, treating everyone equally. And providing insights that are relevant for different types of stakeholders. And it's quite a bold experiment. And we're going to discuss later with Jessica how the next step of measuring the impact of open science, and with Iain of how to monitor open science, how their frameworks from PathOS and OSMI fall into this Irish effort. So basically, each monitor has two views. It has an indicator view that allows users to see trends, measure progress, has nice visualizations, which you can download, you can filter, you can see uptake over time, you can benchmark yourself nationally, internationally, and so on. And then there's a browse research output view, where you zoom in each individual publication, dataset, software, and so on, and see all the metadata that is assigned to it, that's related to it, some classifications, indicators, open access colors, and so on. And you can drill down, the filters are huge, and there's advanced search there as well. So we allow a bird's eye view and also a zoomed in view. The indicator view has graphs like this one. Here, for example, we show over time, this is at the national level. The yellow line for each year, the yellow boxes are published in open access publications, which are gold or hybrid. Okay, gold includes diamond here. Then green open access, the green is green with license. So very strict in Ireland. So we consider open access as only the ones that have license information also. And the blue is those that are both repository and publisher open access. So we have graph like this one or these ones. Here, for example, we measure the average citation by per publication by the SDG that they relate to. And here someone can see the impact of the production and so on. Then when we go to the research output view, this is a simple search page. We have the filters that have been applied on top. So for example, here we're at the Irish Research Library. We're looking at publications that are peer-reviewed. And we see all the publications sorted. See here they're sorted by relevance, but they can be sorted by citations and by other things. With their metadata, the access routes, and number of citations, people have cited them. And here it goes all the way down. There are multiple filters and the possibility to download the first some thousands of results, or go to the data dump and see the data there. And then per publication, someone can click and see the respective publication information. Everything here is powered by the OpenAIRE graph. Here is the OpenAIRE graph pipeline, starting from the various sources that are aggregated, going through several steps and leading to the graph that is produced monthly, which is fed by API to the Open Access Monitor for Ireland. And here, once user feedback is given, it can be integrated back to the graph. How does user feedback look like here? So there's some automated methods and there's manual curation as well. So there is syncing with ORCIDs. So people, researchers can claim organization on their own. There is linking of outputs. So an organization can claim, link some outputs to their own organization, or projects to publications, or communities to publications. There are several ways to improve the links here. There is a sandbox that we have for dashboard managers of RPOs and RFOs, where they can check data quality and new features before they're released in production. There is a functionality to upload a set of DOIs and compare the metadata and availability. of these publications from the uploaded ones to the ones that are in the graph or in the Irish monitor. One can connect the repository to the graph via OpenAIRE provide, use the service OpenOrgs in order to clean up the affiliations. This service works semi-automatically, so different duplicates of organizational names, they are shown up once you search, and then you have to verify which one is correct and belongs to the same organization, which not. And then, of course, we help you curate your data one-on-one. So all this effort is done to make the monitor actually useful for institutions. So let's see a little bit, a small evaluation of what happened with the monitor. So what went well? So there are 69 organizations, which include 48 RPOs and 21 RFOs that have registered dashboard managers. These are the only types of organizations that can have a dashboard manager. And of course, there are many more organizations in Ireland, but these almost 70 are engaging, creating data, and starting to integrate the monitor in the workflows. Many more have engaged through the help desk and coming to webinars and so on. Of course, we prefer to have much more integration in the future, but this is what went well so far. The very nice thing is that we saw a very noticeable uptick in metadata improvements that can be seen by looking at the historical snapshots of the monitor. And of course, we can notice this in organizations that have worked one-on-one with us to improve their data, but also in general in other organizations or at a national level. Besides the normal increases that we see in publications over time, we also see a much bigger share of publications with licenses, with PIDs, and so on. So, of course, we don't know how much of this can be attributed to this Irish idea of just expose all the metadata and see what people can fix and what is in general community uptake, but it's good news. We also use text mining for 3 funders, SFI, IRC, and HRB, in order to improve the completeness of their dashboards. So we use dedicated text mining algorithms in order to improve the links between publications and projects. So in some occasions, we have the project information for the funder. In some occasions, we don't have the project, so we do the text mining just with the funder name. And we look into acknowledgements, footnotes, publication text, and so on. These algorithms, they have 98, 99% precision, depending on the funder. And in general, they help improve the quality of data a lot. The dashboards are automated, transparent, and actionable. So we achieved what we set out to do. And it has allowed users to view issues with the data, which is the most important thing. So we know already for some users that they use what was shown in the monitor in order to support internal developments, follow the latest version of the OpenAIRE guidelines for metadata, and so on. So there is some positive feedback. Of course, there are some negative things as well, or some things that we're working on and would like to work with you on. There are some initial concerns about discrepancy between internal records and what is shown in the monitor. Of course, that is not surprising because the monitor reflects what's in the public. And when the data is aligned, trust grows. So we have used these examples whenever they are shared with us in order to work really with the organization and be like, okay, what is your repository? What guidelines are you following for metadata exposition? Check that it's probably aggregated, if there's some transformation rule that is not working. And then we tell them what kind of metadata we're getting from other sources as well. And this way, whenever concerns were shown, we were able to finally come up with something that's, of course, much stronger than the internal data, because it's not a surprise, it includes other data sources here. But The point being here that it makes the monitor actually useful, and it can help these adopters convince their organization that yes, this can be used in order to track, in order to make decisions and optimize policies. These discussions have included very valuable questions about repository practices, metadata quality, the terminology that we use, what is clear from a graph and what is not. And in general, it was very useful to understand the usability of the monitor from the perspective of the user. So, what organizations told us that they need? From the conversations that we have, organizations need more clarity and support around interpreting and using the dashboards. So we've been updating the terminology and construction for indicators to make it more clear. And we're now planning to include some more descriptive statements on top of every tab of the dashboard to help the users. We have already conducted training last year and in 2024 different parts of the year. But I think we are ready now from what users have told us for a train the trainer sort of module, so that we train the trainers and the trainers then train internally. So that would be much more easy to organize within each institution to set this up. And then in generally what we're hearing from the different organizations, and it's not a surprise at all, and it's something that maybe Iain can talk about later as well, is that organizations that just want a monitor that meets them where they are. They have some sort of internal process that they use for evaluation and decision making, and they need a dashboard that they trust, of course, so we have to make sure the data is correct, and that has the functionalities that they expect and provides them information that they need. So we're working hard to make sure that this happens. What does this mean? It means that we need your help, and this is how I'm going to ask for it. So what we're doing now is we're preparing some case studies with organizations. So a couple of organizations are joining us for the conferences are made before, so they can be the first case studies. And they highlight real examples of how the monitor is used and how it helps an organization. And we're looking for more case studies like that. So if there's an organization that wants to work with us to improve their data or just tell us what they feel about it, we're happy to do that. We'll do the training, as I said, we'll do the trainer program. And then we were asked by several users in a previous webinar to build a community of practice, a kind of structure, but informal space where dashboard managers can ask questions and have answers by our team or talk to each other and so on. So there seems to be a need for that. So if you have an opinion about this, please share it with us. And focusing also on the researcher dashboard. At this point, it includes all the publications and research outputs of a researcher and a couple of simple indicators. But we are planning in the next year or so to expand it to include some elements from narrative CVs, from some other work that OpenAIRE is doing in projects, and in general indicators aligned with responsible research assessment. Of course, to do so, there will be a webinar, we will get feedback, we will collect needs and so on. Okay, so reach out to us to make sure that a monitor becomes kind of a shared infrastructure. And I hope that this talk sort of covered of what was the goal, where we are, and what we found, the issues we found, and where we're going next. And I'm going to stop here and pass the word to Jessica. Thank you.
Thank you, Ioanna. I'm going to share my screen. Can you see the screen in full presentation mode?
Yes, Jessica, we can see. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So thank you, Ioanna, for this introduction. And I'm Jessica Catalano from CSIL, and I'm pleased to be here and share insight from the PathOS project. PathOS is funded under Horizon Europe and aims to better understand what are the impacts arising from open science and how to measure this impact. So I will tell you what are we doing and what are the key output of this project. So let me briefly remind why PathOS. Well, open science is changing the landscape of research, is making scientific results more accessible, transparent, and inclusive, and it potentially have benefits on academia, for economy, and society at large. But is this happening in practice? Are these benefits materializing? Are these working? So to understand this impact and to measure this impact, we need a solid methodological framework. And here the role of PathOS. So PathOS is a project funded under Horizon Europe. It started 3 years ago, so in September 2022, and it is expected to be completed by August 2025. It involves 10 partners across Europe, and altogether we are working to provide a comprehensive framework to identify this impact and measure this impact. In particular, the objective of PathOS project is to identify which are the impact pathway of open science across academia, society, and the economy, with the view to enhance the understanding of this impact and support the decision-making process. More specifically, we are trying to describe what are the impact, how this impact materialize, so which factor contribute to the generation of this impact, and we are trying to design and estimate indicators for the monitoring of this impact, also using artificial intelligence methodologies, and we are also formulating and designing a cost-benefit analysis framework, which is specifically tailored to measuring impact associated to open science. I will tell you more on this in a few minutes. So within the PathOS project, we have carried out 6 case studies so to investigate how open science practice have impact on academia, economy, and society. I will not go into details of each case studies, but just to let you know that this case study cover a wide range of domains. For instance, just to let you know that the first case study investigates how innovation is triggered by elixir resources. For instance, the third case studies looks at the emerging artificial intelligence that are fostered by open science, and so on. So for each of these case studies, we try to understand how open science are producing impact according to which pathway, and we are trying to measuring this impact. What are the key output of the project? Well, there is a framework describing this impact and how to measure this impact, and also providing a description of the typical cost and benefit associated to this impact. An initial version of this framework is online, but it is currently updated on the basis of the evidence we have collected so far, and so it will be finalized and revised before the end of the project. Then we have produced an handbook of indicators that is a sort of guidance on how this indicator should be monitored and tracked, or now this impact should be monitored and tracked. And then we have carried out a comprehensive literature review to see what is already tracked by the literature in terms of impact on academia, economy, and society. In the framework of PathOS, we have also developed case studies, as I said before, and also 2 case studies which are specifically testing the cost-benefit analysis framework that we have developed for open science. These case studies are under finalization and will be released before the end of the project. Then we have carried out a number of training for policymakers and research administration, and we are currently working on a synthesis and providing a recommendation for future avenues on this issue. So for the literature review, as I said before, we carried out a comprehensive review of the existing literature on academic, economic and societal impact of open science. And overall, we reviewed more than 700 scientific papers. And in particular, what we have seen for the academic is that there is a lot of evidence. So we reviewed more than 480 papers, mostly focused on open access, citizen science, and open fair data. And the key impact that we found were on citation, quality, efficiency, and the productivities. In a similar way, we reviewed papers focused on societal impact. There were around 119 papers, and they mostly focused on citizen science and open access. And here we found that the key impact area are on education and awareness, and climate and environment, and social engagement. Less evidence is available for the economic impact. So the papers are there is less evidence of paper investigating this issue. There are many theoretical papers on expected gains, but very few papers dealing with the real measurement of impact. And most papers are focused on open science, open data, few ones on citizens, and most of citizen science, and most of this paper comes from the medical and biotechnical sector. The key challenges that we face here is that there is no clear definition of open science impact, and it's difficult also to establish the causal link between the measure and the output. So there is a strictly more challenging to measure economic impact. Going back to the indicators, what we have provided in our handbook is basically a list of key metrics that we think are useful to track this impact on academia, economy, and society. What I want to stress here is that while some metrics are well developed and also adopted in several fields, for instance, citation and so on, there are other metrics that are less developing and harder to measure. These mostly relate to societal and economic impact. But the key message that I want to give here is that the handbook is not only is a sort of inventory of what can be tracked and what we wish and we would like to track also in the future for open science. So, as I said before, the final version of the handbook is under work and will be released before the end of the project. The key challenges that overall we face is that it is difficult to establish a causal link between open science and impact, because you may have some additional factor that in a certain case influence the materialization of the impact. For instance, increased collaboration after open data and policies can also be fostered by additional funding or training, and this makes the attribution of the impact really difficult. So the main message that we got and the main lesson learned is indicators alone are not sufficient to understand the impact. What is needed is also to investigate how this impact materializes. So to look at the causal pathway and the several factors that contribute to this impact. As a part of this framework, as I said before, we have also designed and developed a CBA framework that is specifically tailored to the measurement of open science impact. Let me say, for those who have never heard before, that the cost-benefit analysis is a methodology well established and used in the evaluation field, and also officially adopted by the European Commission and the European Investment Bank to assess investment and support financing decision. So there was, before PathOS project, there was an application of CBA to open science. So it's the first time that we try to apply this methodology to measure and quantify impact of open science. And the CBA has the advantages that it not only focuses on the benefits, but also focuses on the cost. So it allows to compare benefits and cost of open science. But more important, it allows to compare cost and benefit against a scenario where open science is not implemented. So it allows to draw conclusion on what is the net change, the net benefit brought about by the open science measure that we are evaluating against a scenario where this open science is not available. So we basically designed this framework by identifying the typical cost and benefits that are associated to open science, and we tested this framework on two open resources. So two resources that are very different. So one is the UniProt database, a freely open database managed by Elixir and the UniProt consortium, and provide information on protein sequences. And the other one is a recap, a repository of publication that is also a collection of institutional repositories. So we applied this framework to these two case studies, and of course, we learned a lot from this exercise. Of course, CBA can be a reference framework and can be a structural framework for demonstrating the value of open resources. This is something that is missing in the literature because, as I said before, there is less evidence on how to estimate the economic impact of open science. So the CBA can be fill this gap in a way by providing a structural guidance on how to identify cost and benefit of open science. And including this methodology in a decision-making process may also help to allocate resources in an efficient way and also help to improve the transparency of the use of resources. However, what we have learned with this exercise is that to carry out an effective CBA, we need robust data. And this is particularly challenging in open science context because, as for instance, the main challenge that we faced was to find data about the access and the usage of these open science resources. And often the manager of these resources does not track the use and the way these resources are used. And also what we understood is that in order to improve the use of this methodology in the future, we need to improve monitoring system. Basically, for instance, by starting monitoring the indicators included in our handbook. And then we need to rely on professional expertise to proper quantify this impact, to proper use this data and attach a monetary value to this impact. So it's a combination both of good data and expertise to do this analysis. So this is more or less an overview of what PathOS is doing and what is the outcomes of from this project and what we expect to provide in the next few months. I'm happy to answer any question you may have.
Thank you, Jessica. Thanks so much. Let's move to Iain first, and then we'll open the floor to questions. Iain, please.
Thank you. I'm just starting the slideshow. Hopefully you can see my screen.
Yep, all good.
Okay, so hello everybody. I'm Iain Hrynaszkiewicz, usually from PLOS, but for today, I'm representing the Open Science Monitoring Initiative, OSMI, where I'm among a group of people who have been a temporary governance structure that's been helping to get the initiative started. So briefly, why does the Open Science Monitoring Initiative exist? As we no doubt all know, there is growing international support for open science, but in particular in May 2023, the G7 Science and Technology Ministers at their meeting in Sendai issued a communique about open science, which in particular noted that a research approach, meta-science, should be used to inspire a framework for open science monitoring. And this, of course, builds on other international and national initiatives intended to promote understanding and adoption of open science, in particular the UNESCO recommendation in 2021. And when we think about open science in this very broad sense, per the UNESCO recommendation, then there are an awful lot of things to potentially monitor, whether those are looking to monitor quantitative things such as research papers and research data sets, or more qualitative aspects as well. And also, just to highlight that open science monitoring, in its broadest sense, is not just about the green part of this diagram, the open scientific knowledge like papers and data, but it's also about thinking about the effects or the impacts of open science, whether there is more engagement with other aspects of society, whether other knowledge systems have been consulted with and are mutually benefiting from open science. So the OSMI initiative, Open Science Monitoring Initiative, OSMI, was initiated in part through people working on the French Open Science Monitoring Initiative. So if you're not familiar, this is a project led by the French Ministry of Higher Education and Research, the Université de Lorraine, and INRIA. And they as part of the French National Plan and Policy on Open Science, had been monitoring aspects of open science since around 2018. And their efforts, which were all publicly available, have sparked numerous conversations and exchanges, particularly with other regions in Europe. And if you're interested in more information on the French Open Science Monitor, there's lots of data on lots of different aspects of open science from the link there. So these initial activities in Europe sparked an international collaboration, resulting at the end of 2023, a meeting at UNESCO headquarters in Paris, which brought together various stakeholders, meta-scientists, policymakers, institutional leads, and others to think more deeply together about how an open science monitoring framework could be created, in particular using open technologies, which is something that's very important, the approach of the French Open Science Monitor, for example, using open source tools and sharing open data. So OSMI, the Open Science Monitoring Initiative, has three sort of high-level things that it's trying to achieve, three high-level goals. Firstly is to promote worldwide adoption of open science monitoring principles, to provide recommendations for technical specifications for their implementation, so to provide information on how this could be done, but also to support stakeholders in any region around the globe and at different levels, different types of stakeholders in implementing open science monitoring approaches or solutions. One important outcome of that meeting in December 2023 was a draft document, which is a set of principles for open science monitoring. And that draft was made available in 2024. And then in the middle of last year, a global consultation in partnership with UNESCO was launched in order to get feedback globally on those principles. In brief, the principles are in their current draft form publicly available, but in brief, there are 3 sections of the principles, or 3 high-level principles, within which there are more detailed points. There is a section of the principles which is about the relevance and significance of monitoring approaches. And so one example of that section is about inclusiveness, so indicators taking into account diversity of academic domains, social contexts, and different languages. Another high-level principle or part of the principles document is about transparency and reproducibility of open science monitoring efforts. They cover, for example, things like quality of indicators, so accuracy, coverage, and timeliness should be indicated and evaluated and preferably made public for monitoring efforts. And also that finally, there's a section on self-assessment and responsible use of open science monitoring, open science indicators. And a key example there is that these new sources of information shouldn't be used to create uncontextualized rankings of different organizations or individuals as part of a means to promote responsible use. Something that I'm going to spend a little bit of time on is some activities that have really gotten started in the last couple of months or through 2025 as part of the Open Science Monitoring Initiative. So we have very recently announced the formal launch of 4 working groups, which was one of the key activities of establishing the Open Science Monitoring Initiative. And there are 4 of them, which I'll summarize briefly. So the first working group is about trying to understand the different problems that open science monitoring needs to solve, or the different needs that different stakeholders have globally in relation to understanding or monitoring various aspects of open science. So this group is co-chaired by Julien Dicourt and Nabila Salisu. And so they, among other things, are going to try to understand who the stakeholders and beneficiaries are in relation to open science monitoring and what their needs might be with respect to the aspects of open science that need to be monitored. And also identify areas that might require different approaches to monitoring, be those the quantitative approaches or more qualitative approaches, for example. So the second group, which very much complements that first group, which is about sort of understanding the problems that we need to solve for open science monitoring, there's a second working group chaired by Michelle Barker and Lamis Shahir Mohammed Alkia, that is trying to understand what's already happening with open science monitoring. And we've been hearing about some very relevant initiatives in this webinar so far in terms of existing solutions, existing approaches, services, initiatives, or pieces of research that have looked at different aspects of open science monitoring. And so they'll be doing some research to bring all of that information together in a useful way. The third group is open science monitoring with scholarly content providers. So the 2 co-chairs for this group are Libogang Gopalang and Iracha Puebla. And this group aims to identify ways in which scholarly content and its providers can support the creation of different solutions, different approaches to monitoring open science that meet these diverse problems and needs that we'll undoubtedly discover more about in the other working groups. I'll clarify, but when we say scholarly content providers, we don't just mean publishers of articles. Those are relevant, of course, but when we talk about scholarly content providers, we also mean infrastructure providers, whether those are open archives or repositories of different research outputs. This also includes libraries, standard setting organizations, funders, and meta researchers. So all of these different stakeholders that were involved in different ways in producing and consuming scholarly content. So what are the different aspects of open science that could be monitored better when thinking about these diverse and rich sources of content and bringing stakeholders together to think about how that could be achieved? The fourth group is probably the most technical in nature, and this is focused on shared resources and infrastructure to analyze scholarly outputs at a very large scale. So the co-chairs for this group are Pragya Shob and Christina Hudiu. And the objectives of this group are to foster understanding of what the state-of-the-art tools are for extracting information from content and full text, encourage sharing of knowledge and data that's extracted within consistent frameworks, and also to think about how, to the shared resources point, the considerable computing demands and requirements that are introduced from those kind of approaches can be more effectively shared. So those are the four working groups. A bit of detail, but this is one of the very latest things that the group has achieved, and there's a lot of opportunity for others to get involved in these groups. One still can apply to be a member of these groups if you're happy and willing to contribute and do work. If you're interested in the OSMI initiative but perhaps don't have time to volunteer on a working group, you can join the mailing list and follow along. So in terms of what's next, or what's happening now with OSMI, we're continuing to recruit new members. As you can see from this neat little map here, we have a fairly global representation of different members, but with a bit of a concentration in Europe. So we're in particular looking to recruit new members in Latin America, for example, Africa, and the Asia Pacific region as well in particular. Something that hasn't happened quite yet, but is due to happen this summer, is to release the final version of the principles. So these are the version of the principles that have been revised in response to numerous comments that were received on the previous draft, which is the one that's currently publicly available. Also, there's more work going on to further build the governance structure. So we have working groups, there is a coordination committee, there is this temporary additional group that includes me that is helping to assess and others to establish the governance structure, but more permanent long-term governance is also being sought. And also a shout out to a conference that I think the PathOS team probably deserve the most credit for, but there's a conference in Paris in July about open science monitoring progress and assessing impact, and OSMI will be very visible there to engage with members and others. And I think that's the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Iain. If you can please keep the QR code on there for just a minute or so more in case someone wants to if someone wants to scan it to sign up. I wanted to ask one question to you, and then one question for Jessica, and then I will see if we have some questions for the audience. I was just wondering, Irish organizations are wondering, like, this monitoring framework and the principles and the different working groups. How are they going to deal with the fact that there is differences in maturity of open science uptake across organizations, across countries, and in general, the fact that there is so much diversity? How is this going to play a role?
Well, I was muted. But after 5 or 6 years, we'd all remember where that button is. So that's an important point. I think that can be considered or addressed in a few different ways. I think one that's really important is making sure that there's a really diverse membership of OSMI. So, for example, we're not biased towards a particular region, but also biased towards particular approaches. I think I personally, like some others, I have a lot more experience with quantitative approaches to monitoring from some work that we're doing at our organization. So I think really thinking about the diversity of approaches that are needed is important there. Also, I think that the kinds of outputs that we're talking about are more like a framework. So we're not talking about setting a standard for a particular aspect of open science monitoring. I think that would reflect a certain level of maturity. So I think flexibility, adaptability, modularity are all kinds of things that are actually included in the more detailed version of the principles, which I didn't get time to go into. But yes, it's not going to be easy to try to build an approach that is immediately going to meet everybody's needs, but we're trying very hard, to consider different levels of maturity, different needs in the various activities of OSMI, and always welcome ideas on how to better achieve that.
Thank you, Iain. And it's a great community initiative, and I hope after this seminar, webinar, more people sign up to get. We'll get some more dots in Ireland, but that's still good. And one question for Jessica. So you ran the cost-benefit analysis in for ReCap and UniProt. So there was a focus group there where you went to people and they were like, well, this open resource has saved you 3,000 euros per person use it, and you have gained 5,000 euros or lost, I don't know. You gave them a bottom line that was very like in the euro value, right? How did people respond? Were they able to trust these numbers? How did this thing work?
Well, I have to say that when you say that people have to pay for open science, they're a bit scared. So the focus group, during the focus group, we tried to reassure them that this was an exercise, try to understand what they would be willing to pay in a scenario without it. And anyway, what we found was that there was a difference between people coming from academia and people coming from private sector, because as you know, people coming from academia mostly rely on public funds, and maybe they are also uncertain about the funds they are available and so on. So there is a lower willingness to pay for people coming from academia, while from private, of course, they are more interested in accessing these resources because they can help them to foster innovation, to accelerate product development, and so on. So the fundings was basically more in line with what we estimated with our survey and our calculation of the time saved thanks to the fact that these resources are open. Just to let you know, we attached the monetary value to the time saved, to the fact that ReCap is free or UniProt is free and is open. But of course, when you ask directly people, it can give you some misleading results.
Sorry, yes, that makes a lot of sense, and it's very interesting to hear about the difference between academia and the private sector. Let me ask the audience if they have any questions for either of our guests. Okay, then in this case, two last questions before we wrap it up. To Iain and Jessica. Jessica, let's start with you this time. So I was wondering, I mean, it's a bit on the fly here, but initiatives such as the Open Science Monitor for Ireland that has these different dashboards and so on, what role do you think it plays in measuring and identifying the impact of open science and how we move forward?
Sorry, Ioanna, maybe I didn't get your question.
Yes. Let's try one more time. So we set up this monitor for Ireland. Okay, so we're telling institutions, okay, measure your uptake and see that you do better, improve your metadata, and so on. When these institutions move on to, instead of measuring uptake, measuring the impact, which is already done to some extent, but it's not very extensive at this point, as you told us in the literature as well. So how does the effort that we're doing now with the Irish Monitor, how will it look like in the future when it's time to move into the impact of open science? And is there any way that it helps projects like PathOS?
Well, the best way would be to have in place a sort of a tracking system. So what is good for projects like PathOS, which are trying to measure impact, is to have good data. So basically, what is needed is, first of all, a track of users of these resources. So start thinking how this can be done and can be improved if it is already done. So this is the main challenges when you are trying to measure impact. So know who is the people, who are the people using these resources, where they come from, for which purpose, and so on. One can simply ask people to leave their email or basically their institution they come from. This gives an idea on where people are using this data, or simply carrying out a survey on the social media, asking people if they found the resource useful, what they do with this resource, if the resource is saving time for them, for the fact that it's open, and so on. So implementing tools like this.
Okay, and from what I hear, your suggestions include both qualitative and quantitative data.
Yes, exactly,
to collect
because
this
as I
information.
said, PathOS is not only looking at number, but what we are combining is number with a qualitative explanation of this number. We are looking for describing what is the causal pathway that brings you to this number.
Thank you. And Iain, a question for you. You mentioned the French monitor, and we presented today the Irish monitor. What is the circle of exchange here with OSMI? How do the monitors that already exist inform the work of OSMI? And how do you perceive the work of OSMI affecting these monitors later on?
That's a good question. I think one thing that OSMI will do will provide a forum to bring together people who are providing different monitoring solutions, and think about ways in which those could be adapted, adopted to be implemented in other contexts, or to think about additional features that might be useful in different contexts. So I think really providing that mechanism to exchange ideas, in particular because there's a focus on open tools, open data in these approaches, and reflected in the principles, that the intention is to maximize opportunities for reuse and extension and adaptation of these resources.
That's perfect. Thank you. I'd like to thank both of our guests for coming today. It was very interesting to see different perspectives of monitoring here. And also everyone who is in the audience or is watching the webinar exposed, please keep an eye out for future Irish Monitor updates. And thank you for joining in this Open Website series, Open Insight series. Okay, everyone, bye-bye.
Thank you, bye-bye.
Thanks, bye.